Hey guys, today I'm going to be doing a book review on the first 3 books in the Song of Ice and Fire series by George R.R. Martin. That being A Game of Thrones, A Clash of Kings, and A Storm of Swords. A Song of Ice and Fire is a fantasy series that takes place in the world of Westeros. And in this world, magic, palace intrigue, and adventure decorate the pages. A winter that could last for many, many years is on the way, and every character must figure out where their loyalties lie against a backdrop of treachery and murder. So before I get going with this review, do not worry, I am not going to have any spoilers in this. I'm mostly just kind of going to be talking about all 3 of these books in kind of vague terms and my general feelings about them. If you guys have been watching my channel for a while, you know that Game of Thrones is probably my favorite television show at the moment. I look forward to it every single year. I have all sorts of Game of Thrones merchandising. I mean, I'm wearing a t-shirt right now for House Targaryen. And ever since watching the very first episode of season 1, I have just been dying to read the series by George R.R. Martin. And I can't believe it's taken me this long to finally read these first 3 books. So before I get into George R.R. Martin's writing and the content of the book, I'm going to begin with this notion of the pros of viewing the television series first before you get into the books. The fantasy genre can be a very daunting genre. Fantasy is notorious for being big, huge books that can be up to 1,000 pages with dozens and dozens of characters and really just fantastic world building that's really in-depth, and you gotta just weave yourself throughout all these characters and plots and just everything. So fantasy can be, like I said, very daunting, and the Song of Ice and Fire series is no exception. On BookTube, I've seen a lot of people say that they really want to read the Game of Thrones books, but they're daunted because they are so huge. But let me say, I made it through these first 3 books in exactly a month. I don't know how I accomplished that, but I managed to get these 3 books done in 1 exact month. So it is possible to read these books and finish them. So like I said, I think if you watch the HBO series first, that is a massive pro when going into these books. I personally am a very visual reader. I like casting. I do. I literally cast characters in my head while I'm reading, and I love to see visual interpretations in my head of a character. And I also really like visualizing worlds and objects and just anything you can imagine. And that's especially the case with the fantasy genre, because fantasy typically has stuff that you know, new items, new ways people look, new ways of what a land looks like. So it's all very foreign to you when you start. So I personally am glad that I watched the television series first. That may be blasphemous to some readers. A lot of people, they refuse to see a movie or a television adaptation before they've read a book. They like to read the book and then see whatever the adaptation is. And since the Song of Ice and Fire series is so huge, you got this new world, you got dozens of characters and places and objects and dragons and just all sorts of things. I think in the show, you know, you get to see all of that, and it's not so overwhelming. Whereas, I have a feeling if I had read these books first, before seeing the series, I think I would have been really overwhelmed, and I almost wonder if I would not have enjoyed the books as much as I did. I think the show is a really great gateway to help you make connections as soon as you get into the book. Some things that I found really helpful when I was reading was that going into the book, I already knew who was related to who belonged to what family, where each family lived, who were enemies, who were friends, just all sorts of connections. I was able to connect all that much quicker as I was reading, just because I had seen the show first. So yeah, if you are someone who's very daunted by starting up this series, I do highly suggest that the best method for you might be to watch the television series first, so that way it's not so overwhelming when you do get started. So on to the physical content of the book and just my overall love of this series. George R.R. Martin, I think, has a very unique way of presenting this series. He presents the story in the form of focusing each chapter with just one character per chapter at a time. So for instance, in the very first book, the narrative viewpoints are from Ned Stark, Catelyn Stark, Sansa Stark, Arya Stark, Bran Stark, Jon Snow, Tyrion Lannister, and Daenerys Targaryen. And I really think George R.R. Martin's structure, doing this structure of a character per chapter, is really a really good way to go about the story. And I really think it helps keep a reader in tune with the plot and with the characters and not getting so lost within the overall narrative. And also the great thing about this chapter by chapter, character by character scenario is the fact that there's something happening every single chapter. There's never a dull or boring moment in these books, to me personally. I felt like the action was constant and consistent and just always something going on, always something interesting. Even if there wasn't a big action moment, there was always still some character moment. So basically every moment counts, every chapter, and every moment pushes the plot forward in some manner. Oh my god, you guys, the freaking characters! I have never loved and hated so many characters in one series. I think one of the only other series that really made me feel just such a deep connection with every character was maybe the Harry Potter series. In the Harry Potter series, you know, I loved every single character, and then, yeah, you have the characters you hate, but you still love to hate them all. And I just really loved every single Harry Potter character. And I feel like the Song of Ice and Fire series is the exact same way, that there's just so many characters, and I think you really like every single character, or you hate every single character, depending on how you're going. Every character was just so geniusly fleshed out, and so much depth, and just they were all very fascinating. You really have to pay attention to which characters belong to what house, if they're House Stark, House Lannister, House whatever. There is just so many fine details in these first 3 books, and I really love that. And so yeah, if you're not paying attention to who belongs to what house, who hates who loves who, I think you're gonna get confused. So yeah, George R.R. Martin's world building is simply fantastic. So much depth to this world of Westeros. It really feels like a real world, like I can travel to this world and live in it. It's that realistic in some ways, even though you do have dragons and these White Walker zombie thingy-majigs. Even though you do have these fantastical elements, it really feels like a genuine world that you can live in, and that these characters are real and breathing in this space. It's like if I went up to George R.R. Martin and asked him just any little small stupid detail, I have a feeling he'd answer it just like that. Because I think he knows just how fine his world is. He knows every nitty-gritty detail of every corner of his map. And just more of George R.R. Martin's writing, it's just so beautifully done. He uses just enough description to really draw you into a scene. But he also doesn't use too much that you're like, oh god, just keep going, I wanna keep going and going. Stop with all the description. It doesn't ever get to that point. There's just enough description. So he basically gives you just the perfect amount of facts for you to progress through the book, and for you to make connections. And George R.R. Martin, his comedy is brilliant. I don't think I've ever laughed so much in a book. There's just some really great comedic moments, like against all the drama and angst. I remember literally laughing out loud at some lines. It was that was that funny. So then on to book 2. Like I said, no spoilers. What I loved about book 2 is the fact that it just got going. You're immediately kind of thrown back into this world. George R. R. Martin doesn't spend a lot of time kind of updating the reader on what just happened back in book 1. So you kind of gotta go from book 1 almost immediately into this if you want to keep kind of the context in your head and remember all the fine details. I do think book 2 was a tad bit slower. There was a lot more political elements thrown into this one, and I did kind of find myself zoning out a tiny bit on some sections. The fallout of the end of book 1 is basically kind of what sets up this book and what gets the plot and the action going. So then moving into book 3, like I said, no spoilers. Oh my freaking god, I loved book 3. I have heard a lot that this is the fan favorite book, and I can see why, because it certainly is my favorite at the moment. Just like with book 2, this one does suffer from a few slower moments, but they're not really that bad. You can make your way through it. But seriously, once the action of this one gets going, it just hits you with just emotional punch after punch after punch, and it's just non-stop. You never know what to expect chapter by chapter. There's always something going on, something always shocking, and literally the end of this book my mouth was hanging open. I seriously gotta talk to someone about this freaking ending. Oh my god. So yeah, that's it for my vague review, I'll call it, of books 1 through 3 of the Song of Ice and Fire series. I really wish I could go into much more depth, and especially into some of the spoilers, but oh lord, that's probably like another 10 minutes to this video, and I think you've all been here long enough. So, do you guys like these books as much as me, or do you want to read them? Are you going to be watching the new season? I cannot wait for the new season. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and if you liked this book review, you may like these reviews. Bye guys.